I'm super excited for everyone to meet the IMMUSE team. We have Scott, Chris, and BC with us, and we're going to kind of go explore the world of AR NFTs and the future of music and entertainment, which I think is going to be super cool. So thanks a lot, guys, for being here today.
Thanks, Raph. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we'll jump right in. So as I mentioned, we have Chris, Scott, and BC here, who are the co-founders of IMMUSE. And IMMUSE is an immersive music platform. And I think, in short, from conversations that we've had, I think they're kind of taking where entertainment and music and NFTs are kind of at like a convergence, and they're like pushing that, extending that experience a little bit further. So let's jump right into it. Feel free, whichever you wants to go first, but why don't you guys introduce yourselves and share a little bit about how you kind of got into this space?
And then Chris, you can start maybe doing a little backdrop on Heavy.
Sure.
And, should be shared in a moment.
Yeah. Heavy is our former studio name. So if you hear us sometimes reference Heavy, it's that's our past. We got into augmented reality, I want to say 10, 11 years ago. BC and I met at AWE, the second year of AWE in Santa Clara, which is Augmented World Expo. It's like the biggest conference event around augmented reality and virtual reality. I had flown up there from LA at the time. For about a decade before that, I was an entertainment attorney, and I was in actually Web 1.0 from 96 to 2000 before going to law school. So I flew up to Santa Clara to focus on how to bring augmented reality as an art medium to some of my entertainment clients. Met BC, we started rapping out about public use cases for augmented reality and reclaiming public spaces away from billboards and trying to put art back into our cultural spaces. And from there, we really just took off and started building augmented reality experiences all around the world, all the way from Moscow to Australia to Miami to Geneva. Our focus was on creating interactive art experiences that tried to re-engage the local citizens with their communal spaces, whether that's conversationally or just aesthetics, etc. So we've been in the digital art space for a really long time. We were in AR before Google started thinking about AR Core, before Apple got into ARKit. So we're relatively OG in the AR space. Each year, sorry.
Just that you want to share what we did with Google, since the Google logo is there front and center in our.
Sure. Yeah, we actually did an AR experience at Google I/O. I want to say it was 2017, where we did a big mural on the side of one of the tents in Mountain View, and then allowed people to recombine the I/O elements for a photo drop experience.
Very cool.
Yeah. So former entertainment attorney, got back into tech pretty early. I discovered blockchain around 2014, 2015 timeframe. Ended up doing a program called Blockchain University, which was in Mountain View, which was really a deep dive into the Bitcoin tech stack. And from there, did a small spin-off project with the lead of Accenture's blockchain investment fund, where we were trying to create a payment rails platform to support the best-in-class ad blocking systems at the time, which was intended to be a Chrome plugin. But then Brave browser came along, and we're like, these guys are going to do it better. This guy invented JavaScript, so we actually pulled away from the payment rails system, and I focused more on AR again. So at this point, BC, why don't you chime in a bit about your background too?
Yeah, so thanks for having us, everyone. I think Chris summarized the genesis pretty well. So I can do a little bit of deeper dive on another sort of Google intersection. Right when we started doing this, I mean, the idea wasn't originally to start a company and even to run a business. It was just to make interesting interventions into public spaces using augmented reality for street artists. So if you're familiar with the Bowery Wall in New York, it's kind of a famous mural wall, and it's repainted. I don't know. This is called once every 6 months now, maybe more, maybe less. But the original was with Keith Haring. I think it was 82. And we used AR to resurrect every mural that had been on that wall since the original 82 Haring in augmented reality. And Google, I forget how they found out about it, but they wanted to basically film someone using Google Glass and so forth. That didn't come to fruition because it was image tracking and it wasn't like a technical match there. And thank you for the shout out on the hat. This is my third version of this hat. So yeah, we'd explored that with Google, and right before they came out with Glass. So our interest has really always been ideological, and how do we create dialogue between people who are in their spaces, and that's pretty much what we're still doing and what still interests us. Now we're incorporating blockchain, we're incorporating Web3, we're incorporating digital art and music, but the core ethos of what we're trying to accomplish from heavy now into IMMUSE is consistent. So just wanted to wrap with you guys, have a dialogue. It's always great to talk with really smart people in the space, and happy to have this conversation.
And then for me, you've got the lawyer on one side, you've got the creative on the other. And so if this thing was really going to become a business, you had to have the token sales, marketing, operations business guy. So that's me. I've actually known Chris for going on 15 years. We met because I had just left a company called hotjobs.com that had been acquired by Yahoo. So I'm an OG in the .com and ad tech space. And I said, you know what, this is for the birds. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a creator. In addition to music, golf is my other big passion. And so I was like, I'm going to join with a couple guys, trying to make this movie about golf. And I needed an attorney and someone to help with contracts and just help guide some of the biz dev stuff. And I got introduced to Chris by someone affectionately known as Dub Coog. And Dub Coog put us together, and we've been close friends ever since. And then, like a lot of people, you know, when COVID hit, you know, I just had a daughter. I had just separated from that company, Stream Elements, that you see there in the middle. And I had done some consulting work in AR before for that company, Vertebrae. You also see pictured there. I was coming out from about a 7-year run at Innovid, where we tried our best to compete with DoubleClick as a video ad server and own the sort of independent video ad tech space. And I just needed something new. It was a break. I love music. I was starting to understand what was happening in the tech space. And Chris was like, now's the time, man. You've seen what we've been doing for 10 years. Now's the time. And I agreed. So I joined the team. And then together, what happened is we started working on a project with Warner Music and Rhino Records and Niantic that was supposed to be for the Led Zeppelin 4 50th anniversary. And Led Zeppelin 4, for those of you who may not know, is the album that has Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog, Rock and Roll, Going to California. This is probably top 3 rock and roll albums of all time. And we had this opportunity to create, we created the opportunity because it was our idea to create an augmented reality, audio reactive visual experience set to the music of Led Zeppelin 4. Now, I'm going to show you this as a good segue to get into what we're doing now, because this was really one of the main inspiration points. I want to be very clear because I know that this is being recorded. I don't know how it will be shared. This is not yet in a state that is approved that will go to market. These are behind the scenes views from things that are inside the app. So I just want to be clear about those points, but this is our work. And we'll show you what it looks like to be an augmented reality live music, I shouldn't say live, augmented reality music experience in what is the burgeoning AR metaverse. So just make sure I've got the right audio share settings here.
Chose 4 songs. We didn't do the entire album. We were under considerable time crunch. So we chose Black Dog, Going to California, Stairway to Heaven, Rock and Roll. And what you're seeing here would be Black Dog when Scott gets it playing.
Hey, mama, sit
All right.
There we go. Now mute yourself, Scott.
Spend my days with a woman unkind, smoke my stuff and drink all my wine.
That's awesome.
Okay, I hope
Worth the
the
wait.
payoff was worth it, because there's an awful lot of
Well,
drama.
so we actually created a big narrative around this, right? So on this particular album, they took the name Led Zeppelin off of the album,
Mhm.
and they replaced the band name with 4 symbols. And those 4 symbols became sort of representative for each of the band members throughout history then. So they were like the early avatars or emoticons. And we created a narrative of now through this immersive music experience, we would present ultimately to each listener 16 new symbols that they could pick from. And we would skin them in the various materials and effects that you saw in AR. So ultimately we had something like 1,600 combinations that you could pick from. And then that symbol could become your visual representation online for your identity as a Zeppelin fan. And from there, we really leaned into the identity concept, right? And NFTs can potentially come to represent your online identity and potentially just your wallet identity, whether you're true anon or pseudo anon or fully doxed. We really love the idea that these digital assets can come to represent your online presence. And I'm sure that's something that you guys have explored pretty deeply in this space already. But it was through that experience and partnership with Niantic. So this was a Lightship project. They helped fund the whole thing. We're still waiting for it to go to market, but it was through that experience that we really uncovered that there's this gap in the music industry right now of how you experience music. And on the low end of the spectrum, which is truly passive, it's just streaming music. And as you go up this curve, that as we've defined it, you go into more richer media context like music videos and ultimately virtual concerts or live streaming, which is at the end of the day just a really long music video. But then you jump this chasm that exists and you go all the way up to a live concert. And everything along this line costs people money, right? Your fanship costs you money right now. And that's really the only way to interact with the music is on an exclusive license of some type that's released from the music industry to the fans. And this is where we think that we're going to play a really interesting role in this new music environment, the Web3 music space, because we have this real world divide right there. There's a dotted line down the middle. There's this real world divide between scalable digital content and IRL footprint. So tours are great, right? If you go to a live show, you get as close as possible to your musician that you adore or that you're following. But it's really hard for musicians to be in more places than one at one time. So with digital scalability plus real world locations, AR kind of fits that category very explicitly. And when you introduce the idea of shared digital ownership now, you can now potentially reverse some of those expenses that we talked about in being a fan.
So at the core of this solution is this app, right? It's an augmented reality app. It's a Web3 platform. Those assets that you saw in that Led Zeppelin video, those are not, but imagine that each one of those was an NFT, right? So you could buy whatever, the Black Dog NFT, and that NFT would be essentially a file pack that would include, there'd be audio, there'd be visual, there'd maybe be a 2D thumbnail, MP4 version, but really the core of the NFT would be that AR experience, right? So we would partner with an artist and a visual artist, musician, right? You put something like that together, that gets dropped on the platform as the NFT. Then you as the fan buy that, right, through immuse.xyz, that's our property. And then like anything else in AR, you kind of choose where you want to place it, you place, and then you play that experience. Just like you saw, those were screen captures from my phone, but that's exactly what, you know, a person would experience. They'd go and they'd go up to it, and et cetera. And then the element that we haven't really talked about yet, but is core to what we're doing, is this concept of the remix. Core to the heavy studio principle of that, in an ideal state, art is somehow a dialogue, it's somehow interactive. We didn't want this just to be, oh, you get it and that's it, but we wanted to create a way for you to participate, have your own identity, have your own voice. And so we created a very lightweight studio, a remix studio as we call it. We're starting with just being able to remix the visuals. We will eventually get to being able to have an audio catalog and be able to remix stems and things like that as well. But the idea is you bought this NFT, that then unlocks the remix studio. And so now you can start playing with the special effects and all the AR features. When you're done, you can then mint your own version, right? So like an IMMUSE NFT is really two NFTs. There's the core, which we're calling a visual single. And then there's your remixed personal version that you mix as and mint as a derivative. And then the last phone here, and you just see like that's a yellow object as opposed to blue, right? It's our signal that you created a different version. And then you're able to stage it in persistent AR, right? And this is where like cloud anchors are hugely important. So this notion that I did this experience, I thought it was awesome. I live down near Venice Beach, and I want to put this thing in a great spot so that others can potentially come to enjoy and experience this visual single, this experience as well. And what we're contemplating is that that could come with a micro payment, much like a performance fee, right? So if you set up a stage and you're a club owner, you charge a cover at the door. And then when you collect that money, you keep some of it because it's your stage. And then the artist that is playing on your stage keeps some of it as well, right? As a split. And that's very Web3 economic model, right? I'm the person that owns the NFT. I put it out there to stage. Someone pays a micro payment to experience. Me and the artist split that money. And so that's how we're turning these NFTs into a more liquid asset. It's how we're making these potentially profitable, right? We're not trying to make any promises here, but we believe that this model gets you way, way, way faster and better potential financial return, if that's what you're looking for, than the current Music 1.0 NFTs, where you're getting, say, a 0.001% of the royalties, when those royalties are still being generated predominantly from Web 2 models, say Spotify streaming. The artist share of those Spotify streams is already so small, and you're getting a tiny percentage of what is already tiny. It doesn't really feel like there is much of a financial utility to what you would call like the common music NFTs of today. And so we think this is not just a great experience and a really cool creative medium, but a way bigger economic model for how this works. And so these stages that could be out there in the world, just to zip through this quick, you just think about locations where AR makes sense, right? Music and art festivals out in public spaces. We think college campuses could be a really, really cool place for these art experiences, music experiences to live. Anywhere there's tourism, anywhere there's big populations, especially if you're trying to drive people to come check out these experiences. We see great opportunities for brand partnerships as well. Obviously, Nike very deep in the Web3 space. Imagine that outside of every Nike retail store is a Nike AR stage where they support up-and-coming artists, where you can come and see in AR these really cool visual singles, this new creative medium, right? So this is kind of what we're focused on right now.
Yeah, so pause right there, because I think a really good analogy at this spot is if you think of Pokemon Go's Pokestops, right? That database of location spaces is owned and run by Niantic. But if that database of Pokestops, if they were all individual NFTs and the public could own those spaces, and now you can drop content there and they as the NFT owner will own a piece of that performance fee. That's underlying really what we're talking about with the persistent AR side.
Yeah, I thought I'd go back here for the sake of the visuals to take a peek at the Remix Studio, and let's see if we have the same bad luck. Let's see if I
Fingers
can
are crossed.
something here. Okay.
So this
You did.
this remix concept falls directly back into this identity conversation, right? So we really want people to have direct hands-on co-creation of the art in shared partnership with the musicians.
So
Sorry.
we're going to start with this. BC, why don't you describe what this is?
So we were collaborating with a DJ out of Switzerland. Her name is Neuron Pure, and we are just really interested in the intersection between digital art and music. Something I've been exploring for a number of years, just in my own work as a private digital artist, in terms of working with audio reaction and using trap code and After Effects and Cinema 4D's solutions with audio reaction. And there's this sort of like one-to-one audio reaction. This one's a bit more subtle. The jellyfish audio react and some of the other things kind of move in time with the music. But this is a music digital art collaboration that was produced as an NFT and dropped as a 1-on-1 on Super Rare. So that's kind
That's cool.
Okay.
I'm curious how you guys go about that process of like working with the artists and like coming up with these creations.
Yeah, so her work is her music, and her work is very sort of natural, and it deals with the nature and the natural environment and so forth. I'm a surfer, so I had to have water in the scene. Mountains and greens, so I talked her into water and reflections and so forth. And the idea is that this figure is a part of nature. The nature reflects in and through sort of her glass body, and nature permeates human life as well. So in terms of working with we've done a ton of collabs. A collab always works well when two people communicate consistently about their artistic visions. But we really feel like we're in an era where there's a convergence not only of tech, but of artistic fields in ways that I haven't seen in my whole career, where it's just, if you're not collaborating, if you're not working across media, it's becoming more the exception, right, than the rule. The rule is becoming more just intermedia, transdisciplinary artistic creation. And I think the tech is following that lead in many ways.
So what you're seeing here now, we extracted out from that original NFT those jellyfish, okay, and then created a 3D jellyfish to show what that kind of process could be for a lot of artists who are doing 1.0 NFTs, who are releasing music and some kind of visual. And then this notion of like, an Axis NFT, like, if you own the original, then you're on the whitelist to get the 3D AR version. And what you're also going to see here, and I'll be on mute, so if Chris or BC, you kind of want to talk through the little slider on the bottom for the remix, here's what that looks like in our first sort of alpha MVP demo app. So the UI is very rudimentary here, but
yeah, I'll talk through it. There's a slider. The slider adjusts the visual. That's all you got to hear. There it is. So you can see the particle effects, the materials are changing, and basically what's happening is you're starting with this AR visual single at the beginning, And then through this remix process, the fans are effectively creating the rarity table themselves through the effects that they choose to put into the experience. And this is where we think that there's a lot of lean-in potential for people to say, hey, I'm now a co-contributor to the visuals in this piece. So they have their personal imprint in the secondary and in the second NFT, the derivative NFT. And that's what we're really relying on for that personal ownership, that contribution, that almost like an ego stroke, but it's really part of your identity, gets woven into the experience to now say, now what do you do with this NFT? You know, most people are talking about like utility in a PFP project, and utility at that level boils down to, oh, great, you get token gated into a Discord server or something to that effect. What we're talking about is not just the utility of the experience of remixing itself, but now taking that a step further, because this is music, because this is multimedia, these become robot performances effectively, right? When we're talking about the distributed Pokestops and dropping your NFTs in location staking, those stages, those locations become performance and royalty generating spots. And that's where the interim utility comes in.
That's cool.
So just to end cap this, and then I see that Summers asked the question, what we see moving forward is opportunities here for community content experiences. You know, what you saw was me filming from my device, and I happened to be in my backyard on that jellyfish, for example. But, you know, someone's going to be down at the beach, someone's going to be on top of a mountain, someone's going to be in downtown Hong Kong, someone's going to be in Times Square, someone's going to be in their backyard. And so this desire to get people to share, to really tap into our sense of not just identity, as Chris keeps talking about, but just this is what we do now, right? Like social media, we take pictures of the freaking dinner that we're having because the plate looks good and we want to remember that date night. And so we're giving people an opportunity to also take their experiences, take their custom designs, take their thoughtful process of why they're going to a certain location at a certain time, that this song is meaningful or this place is meaningful, and giving people a chance to really create and share community-driven content around these NFTs. Fairly obvious, we've referred to Pokemon, but the idea for gamification here, you can easily imagine an artist who's on tour, and maybe there's, you know, a couple of these in every stop along the way, and the idea is to collect them, or the first fans that visit, you know, will get something else. Maybe you can decide what the encore is going to be for that set list. There's a lot of things that happened during COVID around fan and talent interactions that can be carried over into this NFT world. And then the tech is not really there yet. There's a lot of issues around multiplayer sessions, around bandwidth, around 5G, edge computing needs. But what we absolutely envision is live concert experiences where more holistically, the special effects that are happening behind the stage are really pulled into the entire experience, more spatial engagement. And that if you're an NFT holder, there's a variety of things. Maybe those of you who are there can display and show your NFTs up in the air. Maybe together in a multiplayer sense, you can all co-create your own new NFT, and that becomes like the bootleg, you know, for the show. Like, hey, we were all here in LA on this date for this show, and we collab together on an NFT that is now pinned to that moment. So we're thinking through a lot of other use cases for this and what the natural conclusion is. And then with that, I feel like we should jump into that Q&A. So Chris, are you reading Summer's question, or BC,
Sure.
if you want to answer that?
Sure. We are building first for mobile here, right? That's the predominant platform that everybody's on right now. But we ultimately envision this in a glasses environment. And we like to think of what we're building as a visual Spotify, where if our record catalog is deep enough, and if you're always on with glasses walking around the city, you can now skin the surfaces of the sidewalks or the buildings with pulsing music and visuals to match that. So ultimately, we do want this to live on a glasses platform, but we're building mobile first just because that's what's available to us now. Let's see. Do we need to stake the NFT at a particular location? So this is actually what we're going through with Niantic right now. So Niantic Lightships technology does require specific locations. We don't particularly like that UX. So we are moving, at least for our September public launch, most likely to AR Foundation and Google's Cloud Anchors instead of Niantic's tech. So with Cloud Anchors, you can drop persistent AR content anywhere as long as it can generate a point cloud that's relocalizable by the next people to come along.
Yeah, and connected with that, because Raphael, you had also said that we could use this opportunity to talk about some of the things that would be like wish list, and this kind of incorporation, whether it's IMMUSE or any developer, into the more ubiquitous Google Maps offering, so that those obviously who have the IMMUSE app, in our case, will be able to discover anything they want. They'll be mapped. They'll be able to figure that out. But the key for discovery is always how do you go beyond forcing someone to download your app first to then discover. So ways that we would be able to use the more mainstream Google Maps and say maybe there's a filter that says find AR content in your area, and that would then have the opportunity for someone like us to show, oh, there's all these cool music and art experiences that are out there. So that's definitely something that people ask us a lot about. It's the discoverability of these things, and how do you get through some of that friction of getting people to have to download the app first. Ideally, you could have people discovering the content and going, oh, I didn't know that there was an Iron Maiden NFT here. Now that I know, how do I access it? Oh, I got to download this app first. That's probably how a lot of people could come into the fold.
So shout out to anyone in the Maps team who's looking to collaborate or looking for cool, maybe third parties that want to do some experimentation. Reach out to them.
Yeah, and we are launching a private beta at NFT NYC around this. We've created a custom model, which is a Keith Haring inspired Statue of Liberty that we can remix. Actually, do we want to show any of that as a sneak peek?
Ooh,
that'd
be cool.
That's up to you, but I want to further address just some of the questions here. Antonio, can an artist on tour move their art with them? The answer is yes and no. And so anyone, if you own one of the NFTs, you can place and play it wherever you want. And that's just always your utility whenever you want to feel like playing it or showing it, filming it. We would like to see this develop as once you pick your location, think of that as NFT staking. So you're essentially like taking your NFT off the market in a sense. It can no longer be bought or sold or transacted. Like if you think of it in the traditional sense, right? Almost like now that's money in the bank for the project. And so once you choose a spot, ideally you're at that spot. But what we envision for an artist, like for this example, if their artist is on tour, is that the artist can always create new NFTs and saying in LA, I'm going to push this one, and in New York, I'm going to place that one, and in St. Louis, I'm going to place that one. Ultimately, these are obviously not screwed into the ground physical, and so when an NFT changes ownership, that could be, okay, that marker disappears, now the new owner gets to pick a new spot. So there's, I think, some dynamic elements into that whole thing. I'm going to skip the chain because that will go to Chris and answer the last one. Can anyone create an NFT or they have to partner? So our original go-to-market is that you bring your 3D AR NFT, which is most likely built in Unity, to the table. It's not that you log into IMMUSE and then start assembling and building your own new NFT. We do expect to get there, but that's not how we're going to start with the launch. We are already looking at and talking with people who are on the music side, people who are on the 3D artist side, and looking to create somewhat of a little marketplace to bring people together for those collabs. A lot of 3D artists, they simply need to maybe pick a music file and then they can do what they need to do. The musicians, however, most musicians are not going to have the skills to create a 3D art experience. Maybe they have a vision for it. But I think the key here is really anyone who has that skill set to be able to create 3D AR narratives or filters or experiences will absolutely have a home here. As long as it's combined with music, because that's what we feel is the true, more comprehensive experience, right? Is both visual and audio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just want to mention quickly, maybe we'll hit the rest of the questions in the chat, and there's a few hands that are raised, and then we'll, I guess, open up Q&A to everybody.
Sure.
I think there was like 2 more in the chat.
So the chain that we're building this on initially is likely going to be Polygon. I am an ultra bullish ultrasound believer in Ethereum as a layer one. Not to say that there are not other opportunities for other chains, but I definitely believe in the long-term value of Ethereum. So Polygon, and we're talking to Polygon Studios right now about potentially coming on board as a VC. See, do users have to remint, incur the gas fees when they remix the NFT experience, and is the payment done in IMMUSE? Yes, so there is going to be a gas fee. It is an on-chain transaction, but it's using Matic, so the transaction fees are drastically different than what you're seeing on the ETH main chain. And payment is going to happen inside of our app, and this brings up the fact that we are launching a native token to go with our whole platform, and ultimately likely to be governed and operated by a DAO. So our token is going to be called Remix. It's going to be how you purchase the NFTs, how you potentially purchase the upgradable visual effects, how the musicians partner with the 3D artists, the staking mechanisms, etc. So yeah, we're very excited about even some of the DeFi applications where music and IP can actually become a primitive involved in the staking mechanisms.
Awesome.
We call it curating your reality, right? And so if you think that a certain space just deserves to have a specific song and maybe some different art to it, we want to empower our audience to create that experience and curate the world. So yes, we definitely think even one song, the same song, can be experienced differently in different locations. I mean, this was one of the conversations that BC had with Noron Pure, right? She's very naturalist in her sentiments, but with all of her existing visuals, but she doesn't really know if she wants to have technology as a mediating factor in her spaces. So she asked us, could she drop these experiences in like a natural, like a forest or a park, because that's where she wants people to experience her music. And then the device becomes an enabling factor as opposed to a mediating factor.
Yeah, to be sensitive to time, just to add on to that, also, as the catalog of available assets increases through IMMUSE, right? We envision starting with really bespoke creations. They're going to be partnerships. You're going to have some intention to what you're designing and why. But if you think long term about all these platforms that have, say, royalty-free or licensable music, and then things like Turbo Squid or wherever you have all these 3D assets, if you get to a place where all of that becomes available, and then you can create a way that says, okay, I'm going to pick the track and I'm going to pick the visual, and then I am going to create my thing for my space and pin it here for this reason. Absolutely. I think it's just a matter of longer term scale and availability of all of those options to enable someone to do that.
Yeah, and that goes to one of the earlier questions, which is, would this eventually be a permissionless platform? And that is our ambition, so that people can contribute the content. But because it's built in Unity, we do have to, and Unity is such an extensible platform, right? You've got all the plugins. We have to enact certain limitations on which plugins people use. So there will be some build requirements. Hopefully we get to that point where it's just permissionless and people can drop in the content.
I love that. Awesome. Next question, Josh.
Yeah, just plus 100 at what everyone's saying. This is amazing work, and it's really amazing just to see this. You guys are obviously very talented. I'm curious. I have two questions. The first one is really tactical. Like, how do you deal with permanence of these things over time? Like, I imagine that over time you would have like an infinite number of NFT-based artwork in certain locations, and some of those might degrade over time, or maybe like the location itself changes. Like, I'm just wondering, are these things all on chain? So do they remain there forever?
So we're doing a staking mechanism, which will require a staking contract, but there's periods of time that will be locked up. And so we're exploring whether that's going to be a 7-day minimum or a 30-day minimum.
Got it. Okay.
Because ultimately these become places for performance fees to be collected, right? So if for instance, I have a Katy Perry NFT and I'm like, okay, that belongs at the north end of Times Square, New York. And I know I'm going to see 1,000 people come by and watch this at 0.001 ETH. So that 1,000 plays would generate 1 ETH over the next month. I might say, I'm willing to stake an ETH into the system right now to claim that spot. And we do geofence these. So that same song can't be layered all over Times Square. This would be the one spot for that song. We ultimately do want to support a layered version where more music can sit there simultaneously. And we'll do some surfacing around like a heat map function for how you might like this particular song versus another at that spot. And that's where we're going to start getting into the social tooling of recommendations, et cetera.
Got it. And then that's awesome. And the second question I had is there's so many opportunities to go, like what happens after the discovery of this immersive content. I'm curious, is there any like specific thing you're really excited about of like what users can do after they discover and experience these things? Like I imagine there's unlimited potential for redemption of goods or maybe special access to something while you're in that location. Is there anything that you guys are particularly excited about?
Yeah, there's one in particular that we're considering our own Genesis NFT. Right, so we call these the IMMUSE stages, and we're thinking that this would be a collection of 10,000 stages that the users will then be able to determine where that stage deserves to live, and then those can become future destination spots for virtual festivals. So think of it like, the Travis Scott concert, but with 4 or 5 different performances all on this one local corner, but there's 10,000 versions of those around the world. And the owners of those 10,000 NFTs will share in the proceeds from the rental performances.
That's incredible.
Think of that in a glasses world, right, where you can create more immersive environments. So you're in Central Park, and you've got the trees and the buildings are now acting as they're doing this kind of thing, and there's skins and there's colors and there's stuff popping off, because doing that through a device is very clumsy. But glasses now, just like any other concert, now you're able to create virtual environments layered into the real world. So you're essentially replacing what you typically would see with now the vibe of that concert experience, right? And so when we talk about like an AR stage, we don't want people to think of like the hologram, right? Or like the avatar Snoop is like standing there rapping. It's not. We're thinking way more creative, artistic, and environmentally encompassing, right? There's a lot of steps to get from here to that vision. But that's really what we're building towards. And then, Josh, I would say what I'm excited about is the fan communities that can potentially develop. Because once you embrace Web3, which says not like, so on YouTube, for example, if I try to create my own video of, say, a Katy Perry song, I'll get sued, or it'll get taken down, or you won't let me post it because I don't have the rights, right? The Web3 model flips it, and Katy says, no, please do it. Take my song, go out and make some stuff. And so when you start empowering the fans in new ways, what will they create? What will they come up with? And inevitably, it will be better and more interesting than anything that we might think of in-house, or that the artist might think of in-house. And empowering people to now have these 3D objects or experiences out in the world to create with. Like, you're already starting to see it. There was a video that was circulating with the Snoop avatar, right? And there was like a little dance, and he was dancing and maybe, using some like tracking, right? But this guy now had a video of him and Snoop dancing. You like my dancing, by the way? And so like, what's the next of that? Like at another level of creativity. And I think there's really, really amazing fun potential for that.
We're partnering with our venture funders right now on the best way to set up that governance structure. But the remix token would primarily be a transaction currency. And we hope if this takes off, and if we can actually create a visual Spotify experience that's at global scale, there's a potential for this token to be something like a music industry reserve currency. And so ultimately we think of, if we can restructure the music industry away from a collective licensing arrangement, which is where the licensing is bartered out by the record labels at the center, and really return a lot of that ownership and power to the musicians and writers. Now there's shared ownership with the fans. And so we're turning this into an ownership model as opposed to licensing model. There's a real potential for that reserve currency status to trigger. So if we think of it that way, and we think of the music industry as really just a cultural driver, that deserves to be in distributed ownership hands of the public. So ultimately, we want to do that handoff from our company as a platform creator to just a platform maintainer in partnership with the public. So whether or not the DAO will have direct decision-making authority on what the royalty stream payments are instead of in Congress, right? So rather than having the Library of Congress or the Copyright Royalty Board determining how much money a musician should make, maybe it's the public that's actually listening to the music should make that determination. That's what we want to empower on the DAO side. I will also put out a call for anybody that might be at NFT NYC to be part of our private beta. We are launching a nonprofit DAO called Good Art DAO in partnership with another former client of ours around this big Keith Haring piece of art, you'll see this hanging at the NFT NYC conference center where you do registration and check-in. And then, so this is being turned into a big 396 NFT parcels. But meanwhile, we're also implementing, as I mentioned, a 3D model of that Statue of Liberty. And I promised you a little bit of alpha here. So I'll show you our test run of this model. And what we did here was we bought the NFT from Snoop. Sorry, where was the sound recording sharing?
Usually on the top of the menu bar, like a little slider that says presentation audio.
Shoot, I'm not seeing that. Oh, we'll see if we get the audio anyway. Oh no, there's no audio here. So we bought Snoop's track called Sunshine, which is Death Row Records' new NFT drop. And we embedded this because if you own the NFT, you own the commercial rights to the music. So now we did a sync. And so this is Herring's Statue of Liberty turned into a 3D model. We're not showing you the sliders or the effects that you'll have available to you, but you'll be able to remix that Statue of Liberty and then save that. So this is part of our public beta, or private beta, sorry.
Gosh, we are at time. But why don't you guys throw your like personal socials, ways to get in touch in the chat? I'm sure there are a lot of people in the call that would love to follow up with more questions, maybe ways that you guys can all collaborate, partnerships. I hope they all happen. But thank you so much for coming here today and sharing all the work. This was awesome. I really, really enjoyed this, especially all the visuals. So any last words?
Yes, Diana, thank you.
Can I just say, like, thank you guys for the discussion and the questions, and just after so many VC conversations, it's just nice to get back into a conversation with engineers and developers and people in the space.
Yeah.
So really deeply heartfelt appreciation for the conversation. I needed a boost today, just to be honest, on the personal front. So thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Please keep in touch.
And I will just say, we are seed funded. We do not have an open angel round. However, for the people in the room that are smart enough to have their eyes focused on Web3 in a Web2 native environment, we would welcome any of you guys that want to participate or help out. So we do have a funding round that's open for professional investors and crypto natives, but I'm willing to make exceptions for a Web3 group inside Google. Let us know.
Good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Raphael. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome.
Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next week.